I always try to say to people, Wisden isn't part of the establishment. You may think it is. It's not. It's one of the most independent, if not the most independent voice in cricket publishing. And so being able to use that independence is important to show that there's more to cricket than, a high left elbow and Eton v Harrow, which is what a lot of people still think about cricket. Trying to deal with that perception is crucial.
Hello and welcome to Outlines, a podcast about sport, stories and the media. My name's Eoin Connolly, hope you're well. It is great to have you listening. Another summer of English cricket is upon us. In fact, it's been upon us for a few weeks. But as I'm speaking to you now, the highest profile action of the season is about to begin. England's men's test series and the ICC Women's T20 World Cup. And this year, like the 162 before it, will also be chronicled in a very famous, very chunky yellow book, the Wisden Cricketers Almanack. It's been published annually since 1864, predating entire major sports, and the latest edition was released in April, delivering the usual combination of match reports, authoritative comment, and comprehensive statistics from all levels of the game. That was the 15th edition under the stewardship of Lawrence Booth, our guest on this podcast. He talks about the responsibilities involved as editor of the Almanack, what he sees as its role in cricket in 2026, and the changes he's made to account for the rapid evolution of the sport in the past decade and a half. And wearing his other hat as cricket correspondent for the Daily Mail, he discusses some of the broader trends in cricket media. He explains his approach to an English summer and how that compares to the pressures of an overseas tour, reflects on the different audiences that cricket's many formats and competitions now serve, and looks ahead to some of the storylines that may shape the next few months, from what that World Cup might do for women's cricket to what an influx of investment might do to the 100 and the domestic game. It's one I really enjoyed, and I think you will too. Quick note, we're obviously talking about the English cricket season, and so naturally, somehow, rain manages to interfere with the recording at one point. It's quite brief, but I hope it doesn't affect your listening experience too much. As ever, if you like what you're hearing on the podcast, then do subscribe, rate and review on your platform of choice. It'll help other people find it, as will sharing what you see on social media. Details for those accounts in the show notes, of course. Very grateful for anything you can do to help spread the word about the series. And if you want to get involved, get in touch. Enough of that. Let's talk cricket and Wisden and much more besides. Here is Lawrence Booth. So you're off to Lord's today. After this, straight off to St John's Wood. Obviously, you guys have been back on the beat around the county circuit now for, about 4 weeks probably now?
Yeah.
But does this really feel like there's a step change in the summer once you get to kind of England squads being announced and all the rest of it?
Yeah, I think it does as a sort of covering the daily beat. I mean, I really enjoy the April and May now. They seem to be sort of county specific in England. We used to have May Test, didn't we, where some poor touring team would have 2 matches and one of them would be in May at Lord's, and they get bundled out for not very many. But the tests tend to start in June now, so county cricket really gets its moment in the sun. And of course, this year has been interesting because there's supposed to be this reconnect between the test team and the county game. And so actually, there have been a couple of places up for grabs. You're looking at 3 places specifically in the test team: the opening batsman, the spinner, and one of the seamers. So that's been interesting, actually, going out there with a sense that runs scored and wickets taken in domestic cricket do matter now in a way that they haven't seemed to matter so much in the past 3 years.
Yeah, and there's something about when all the England players are on county duty, which is only really now at the start of the summer. It used to be that, before the kind of proliferation of white ball games, you'd get players after the last test, maybe if their team was in the title race or something, you'd see them pop up again back in their county colours. But you're seeing all these stories, and you've got the mix of kind of, seeing Ben Stokes play for Durham, or also players who, it used to be Marcus Trescothick at this time of year, who everyone would be talking about, he's still got it, and now it's probably Jimmy Anderson. But it brings back stories of a real national profile to the county championship circuit, which then goes between now and September, when it gets to the business end, back to the real kind of badgers and aficionados of that particular world.
Yeah, I mean, county cricket's always needed these narratives to kind of wrestle for space in the newspapers. And when I started in sort of national newspaper reporting in the early 2000s, I did a couple of seasons for the Daily Telegraph on the county beat, and that was great because they'd send a reporter to every game. Even if my first day's reporting was Derbyshire v Warwickshire, September the 12th, 2001. So the day after the world had changed forever. And I remember walking into the county ground thinking, God, this I knew this didn't matter, but this really is way down the news list today. And I got 120 words for my report. But the fact was it was still covered, and so were the other 8 games that day. So that has changed now, and that means that county cricket has to fight for space a bit more. Newspaper editors have seen the empty seats at county grounds and decided in a way that they haven't with, for example, club rugby, which gets great crowds and still gets covered properly in the papers, that it's only a story worth covering if there's an England angle.
Yeah.
Which is a shame, I think. I mean, sometimes the Times and Telegraph still, you can open a spread, and if there's not much football going on that day, you can see they've dedicated some space to it, and that's great. The Guardian does a good live blog. At the Mail, we try to do roundups as much as possible, but it's not quite the same. So, a story like Jimmy Anderson, sort of attempting to make the England selectors look daft for the first month of the summer for Lancashire, is a great one. It just gets a buzz around the game. Or Zach Crawley in a different kind of way. Will he ever score another run for Kent? Ben Stokes turns out for Durham against Worcestershire. I was at New Road on Friday to watch him, and there was a bigger crowd there than I think there would otherwise have been. So a lot of latent love for county cricket in this country, even if you don't always get bums on seats.
Yeah, people working from the Oval, as we were talking about just before we started. The other thing, I suppose, and we'll probably circle back round to this after we've kind of talked about Wisden for a bit and the summer ahead, is, you have this coverage now on YouTube, and you talk about the Guardian live blog. I suppose that's going to become the natural setting in a way that, like, when I think about the way lots of cricket fans follow county cricket, is they kind of have their team from their youth, or maybe somewhere they worked for a while or went to university or whatever, and they'll follow that team, but it will be in dispatches. They won't kind of go to games every week in the way that you do, club football or rugby or what have you. But I suppose YouTube now, and having that access to the coverage, is going to mean that the locus of where that is followed is going to shift. And maybe even if it's not getting the mainstream media coverage or national media coverage that it once did, there is a path maybe to finding that community in a different way.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think let's say the older county cricket members will still go to the games because it is a sort of social occasion for them. They paid their membership. They want to watch some live cricket for it. But it was noticeable. I mean, let's say the first round of championship matches this season, I follow Northamptonshire, and they were playing there was an exciting finish against Lancashire at Wantage Road. The Northants' tail were hanging on. Anderson had the second new ball. And in that last hour, there were about 10,000 on the live stream, because you can see the numbers. And you're thinking, wow, that's a big number for county cricket, when you think that Northants last year, according to the official figures, got something like 4,000 through the gates for home county championship matches in total all season. Now you're looking at 10,000 for an hour's play. You think there is definitely a market there. It's what they do with it. Lancashire recently tried to monetize it, said we're going to start charging for our live stream. There was a lot of kickback, and they said, okay, that's a mistake, we won't do it. But at some point, the counties will have to work out exactly what they do with this great resource. You don't want to shut it down, but equally, county cricket is desperately looking for ways to make extra money. I mean, forget the 100 cash, which is a whole other discussion, but they need to find ways to keep their head above water, especially the non-host counties, and this could be one way. But the fans will be resistant. They've got it for free now. They don't want to go back.
Yeah. Well, anyway, we'll kind of park that for now, because we're doing a bit of a scene setter for the summer ahead, and actually, even by the time this goes out in a couple of weeks, England will be very much on the agenda. So we'll move back to that in a bit. The nature of this being a side project, Lawrence, is if I were sitting and this was my day job and I were plotting an editorial calendar months and months ahead, I'd have had, Wisden is out in the spring. But of course, what happened instead was I saw it had come out and I thought, I should talk to Lawrence Booth about Wisden. But that's what we'll do now. So most people will, those people in this audience, I think there'll probably be a fair few who've been keeping a copy of Wisden for, since some unspecified point in their youth and have been stacking them up in the years since. But just for the benefit of those who don't, what is Wisden in a kind of, if you were at a dinner party or a wedding and someone said, Lawrence is the editor of Wisden, well, how would you explain it to someone who knew nothing about cricket?
A lot of people call us the Bible of cricket. We kind of resist that tag, but I suppose it's useful in as much as it tells you that, in theory, Wisden is the last word on cricket. It's been going since 1864, so potentially the longest running sports publication in the world, and it covers the previous calendar year in cricket with an English bias. I would say county cricket gets covered in some detail. It's a record book, it's a comment book, and it's the book that takes a view, and the opinions make international headlines amazingly. So it's a great thing. It's an anachronism. It probably wouldn't be started now if it didn't exist, but it's been going now for 163 editions, and people collect it. So it's all those things.
Yeah. It's 163 editions. You've done 15?
I've done 15, yes.
When do you start thinking about the next one? How much of your life, because you have a pretty time-consuming day job, so what's the process by which the whole thing gets put together? What's the kind of year look like for Wisden?
Yeah, good question. Some people have said it's like painting the fourth bridge. You're kind of working on the following year's book even before this year's book has come out, and that is true because we go to press late February and we publish in April, but in that January and February, cricket is happening that will go in the following year's book. So obviously match reports from Bangladesh v Sri Lanka will need commissioning. So we're kind of staying on top of developments. The honest answer is I never really stopped thinking about it. And particularly the part one section. So I won't call them essays because that makes them sound too sort of academic, but the big meaty front of book pieces beyond the notes by the editor and the five cricketers, the kind of 15, 16, 17 articles that you are trying to use to reflect not just what's happened in the previous year, but there might be an anniversary coming up, or there might be a story that's never been told in cricket that you think this is our chance. It's quite a free rein, but you have to get that balance right between the different types of pieces. So that kind of consumes me throughout the year as a thought process. And then the ideas are already milling around. Sometimes we save ideas from one year to the next, and then June to July we start commissioning them. They start to come in towards the end of the year. It's a cycle I've kind of got used to now. I've done 15, so I think I'm in the groove, but it's still a lot of work, and you still have to stay on your toes. And as you say, I've got this other newspaper job, which was actually my full-time job. Yeah. So you have to be organised, essentially.
Yeah. How did you get the gig in the first place? Can you?
Well, it was
divulge.
Well, there's not much to divulge, really. I was taken out for lunch by someone from Bloomsbury, who are Wisden's publishers, and they said, "Would you be interested in the job?" And I wasn't expecting it at all. It's not one of those. There's no career progression to becoming a Wisden editor. It's a weird, unique job that requires a lot of luck and circumstance to be in your favour at the time. And I had that, so I was offered it, and I thought, well, if I don't say yes, someone else will, and I'll regret this. Friends used to tell me I used to grow up saying I wanted to be the Wisden editor. I don't remember this, but so in theory, I've got my dream job. And it's a huge privilege, but it's slightly scary at times as well.
Yeah. Does it feel like a dream job most of the time, or how does it consume your thoughts? What kind of thoughts are they?
Oh, dark thoughts. Well, like I say, the hardest bit is getting that balance right in part one, and making sure you're not downplaying a subject. A subject might come up like, let's take a very contentious issue like trans cricketers, for example. Now, you know that if you do an essay on that, you're going to get shot at by one side or the other, and possibly both.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, we did a piece about 6-7 years ago by Tanya Aldred on the issue, kind of got ahead of it because we felt that this subject will kick off at some point. I mean, it actually hasn't quite kicked off in that way, but the cricket is kind of, there have been pockets. So you're looking not just to reflect cricket as it is, but to stimulate thought, to challenge people. There's a little bit of activism if you feel strongly about something, and you could use a front of book article for that, or a couple of paragraphs in the editor's notes. So you're a bit of everything. I think if you just reflected cricket as it was, you probably lose readership. You need to sort of hit hard when the book is published, because we're a book and we still need people to read it and buy it. So it's getting that balance right that is probably the hardest thing. And that keeps you thinking all year round, really.
Yeah. Is that the thing that maybe you came to appreciate more once you were in the job? Because, you know, the prestige of it and the uniqueness of it and the idea that it's something that people get and they can thumb through all the records and stuff like that is obviously well established. But the amount of time, because in the cycle, people will think, oh, Wisden have said this about investment here, or they've said this about, you know, the development of this form of the game. But that comes and goes. I mean, you can sit with it and read it if you've got a copy, but, you know, in terms of the news cycle that comes and goes, has it surprised you, or has it changed your perspective, the amount of time you spend thinking about that side of it?
Yeah, I mean, I've been involved one way or another with the Almanack since the 99 edition. I did work experience at Wisden Cricket Monthly in the summer of 98 when I left university. And then one way or another since then, I've sort of been in the Wisden family. So I got a sense of how it worked before I first edited my first one in 2012. But having said that, until you're in the kind of the hot seat yourself, I suppose, and your name's on the book and you're responsible, and if there's a typo, well, that's my fault. I'm not going to throw someone else under the bus. That my name's on the book and that is my fault. Yes, absolutely. Then it does hit home. And I mean, look, so far this discussion might imply to listeners that I make all the decisions in this front. I have an incredibly strong editorial team who I discuss all these things with. I mean, we meet up regularly, quite apart from proofreading sessions. We meet up to discuss ideas. And, you know, if I come up with an idea and someone says, no, that's rubbish, I say, fine, okay. But that might spark another idea. So I am heavily reliant on some very good people under me. Hugh Chevalier's the co-editor, Kit Harris, Kate White, Harriet Monk, Stephen Lynch. All these people are absolutely fundamental. But yes, essentially the buck does stop with me. Most people say, oh, so you have to choose the 5 cricketers of the year and write the notes. That's not a bad job. Those are the nice bits. There's a lot of grunt work that goes on underneath. People might be surprised how unglamorous most of the job is. 95% of it is deeply unglamorous.
Yeah. I couldn't imagine, you know, you talk about typos, getting someone's record wrong in their final year of whatever, university cricket or something like that.
We've done worse than that. I mean, well, actually, I'll go a good one, one that gets cited quite often. Fred Truman made his debut for Yorkshire against Cambridge University in, I think, 1947. And he was one of 3 debutants. Brian Close was another one. And Wisden described him as a spin bowler.
Oh, goodness.
And he never got over that. He always... you know, when you said to Truman, not that I ever did, but if you said, oh, Wisden's the Bible of cricket, he would just scoff and take a puff of his pipe, say, call me spin ball. You know, so you
can't, unlike him to hold a grudge, you would think.
Well, that's funny, isn't it? Yeah, who'd have thought?
I mean, you've been there since 2012, and I mean, that almost marks the point at which cricket starts changing into the kind of multi-headed beast that it is now. We're kind of a few years into that progression at that point, a few years into the IPL, etc. But how has the role of it changed in your time there, and how much of that is because of things that you've done that you've thought, you know, obviously I'm a custodian here, but I can change things in terms of the editorial prospectus, but also how much has just been changed because the conversation is so much more international, so much more global than it used to be. There's so many, whether it's money or whether it's player time or whether it's the women's game or there's so many things that now factor into big picture conversations around the sport that, Wisden will have to engage with.
Yeah, I mean, it's become much more political. I mean, not just politicized, but also political in the broader sense. So for example, one of the things I did since I came in was introduce a new T20 franchise section. Now, I don't for a minute imagine that traditional Wisden readers are going to be that fussed about, the Caribbean Premier League or the Bangladesh Premier League. But as I was saying earlier, part of our job is to reflect cricket as it is. And even if some readers might turn their nose up at some of the white ball stuff, complain that we don't run full scorecards for the Sheffield Shield like we used to, I'm afraid that is just the reality. We have to keep the book within about 1,500 to 1,600 pages, really, closer to 1,500 preferably. And you alluded to it there, the women's game has grown a lot. I mean, our women's section is growing. One of the things I've done is, I think before I took over, there'd only been one female cricketer of the year, Claire Taylor, and I've lost count of how many there've been since I've been doing it. Must be approaching double figures. Now, I'm not saying because I've been more open to the matter than other editors. It's just that the women's game has grown, and that has to be reflected. I mean, we had 3 in 2018 because England had won the 2017 World Cup, and I briefly considered 5. There were 5 good candidates. I thought, wow, if I choose 5 women cricketers of the year, that really will put the cat among the pigeons. That will delight some people and annoy others. So, like I say, it was a combination of reflecting cricket, but also pushing it a bit, challenging it, poking it. I mean, I've tried to take a strong line on the politicization and particularly India's dominance of the game. And again, I get a fair bit of stick for that on social media, but that's fine because a lot of it's name calling. I'm yet to see good arguments as to why power shouldn't be used with responsibility, which is my essential objection to the way some of cricket is run. So, I mean, John Woodcock, who edited 6 editions in the 80s, he always said he couldn't have done the job today because it's just so political. He used to just like to write about the cricket and wrote these beautiful match reports and was a read his notes. They're like sort of silk on the page. But the game has changed. The finances are now, you have to almost have a degree in economics to be a cricket journalist. It's not why most of us got into the game, but it is now an unavoidably crucial part of cricket, to understand what's going on with the 100 or TV rights, how that impacts the way international game will go over the next few years, what happens to bilateral international cricket. I mean, all these things, I'm not sure I've described a cover drive or a leg break in print for 15 years. Everything is changing, and your job is to be on top of it. And actually, it does make things a bit more interesting in some ways, because it isn't just the on-field stuff. And I think readers want the game covered properly. Yeah.
Is that rain coming through?
It is, yeah. Is that causing a lot of noise?
Well, it's a little noisy. I think it'll probably be strip outable.
My God, that's proper hail.
Very appropriate. Going to talk about English cricket.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that'll settle down in a sec.
Yeah.
What's something you've been particularly proud of in your time there?
I'm sort of proud of the fact that I don't pull any punches, I think. The editor's notes tend to make a bit of a splash when we publish, and that's because I'm conscious of using that platform properly and not to waste it. And I know that if I wrote those same words in the Daily Mail, they will probably be largely ignored. Might make a bit of an impact, but not as much. But you write them in Wisden, and because you've got 163 years of history behind you, what Wisden says apparently is still considered to matter. That's not me saying that. That is reflecting how the media cover it. It's like saying, why do the Ashes matter? Well, they kind of just do because people have decided they do. And so you have to take that responsibility properly. I would think of it as a great waste if I didn't use that platform. I mean, in terms of covering subjects, I always try to say to people, Wisden isn't part of the establishment. You may think it is. It's not. It's one of the most independent, if not the most independent voice in cricket publishing, because we don't have some great owner leaning on us to take positions on anything. And so being able to use that independence is important to show that there's more to cricket than, a high left elbow and Eton v Harrow, which is what a lot of people still think about cricket. Trying to deal with that perception is crucial. Obviously we want people to think cricket's for them. We want to sell more copies of Wisden, sure, but also we care about the way the game's going. So we did a piece in this year's book on the role of state school cricket, for example, which is a big subject that only ever gets touched on and alluded to, and people get angry about it. And James Coyne from The Cricketer did an excellent kind of deep dive into where we're at with that at the moment. So I've tried to give voice to the sort of the what has often been peripheral in cricket, and to move away from this idea that it's a sport for rich white men. So that's maybe what I'm proud of.
Yeah, and just to leave the kind of the Wisden conversation to one side. I mean, I don't want to give it how long do you think you'll be there, but where do you think there is to kind of take it? What are some of the things that you're thinking about maybe for next year and for the future of it?
Well, you know what? Every year I kind of put it to bed and think I'm exhausted. Is this the last one? And then actually cricket has this amazing way of throwing up stuff. I mean, there is always a story in cricket, especially now, as we were saying earlier. There's politics, there's economics, there's the characters in the game. There is always something happening, and I think it would be weird if, as a journalist, you weren't kind of excited by that. And of course, doing my Daily Mail work, I kind of try and get under the skin of stories, and so that helps as well. I'm kind of getting to grips with what's important. That feeds into my Wisden work. I mean, next year, of course, is the 150th anniversary of Test cricket, so that'll be a big moment for us to take stock of where we're at. Yeah, not just celebrate the path to this point, but also to plot the way ahead. So that's clearly in my thinking at the moment. We are a kind of Red Bull book, really. Wisden is a book of Test cricket primarily that has had to cover the white ball stuff because it's there. But we all know that the white ball stuff doesn't leave the same imprint on you. Most people, you ask them for their 5 favourite cricket matches, and they'll be Test matches. The 2019 World Cup final might get in the mix, but apart from that, so we're protective of Test cricket. We don't want to be blind to developments, but we will fight for it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's a nice segue into kind of the next bit of the conversation. As you mentioned up the top, you're off to Lords later to get the first men's squad of the summer for the Test series against New Zealand. How do you? I think there's a really nice counterpoint this summer, because you've come from the intensity of an Ashes series away, and it's an intense experience for the media as much as it is for the players. You're all kind of, traveling in this narrow band around this gigantic country of not always friends the rest of the time, but maybe not for those kind of 6 weeks. And then you come back to England, and obviously, it's a completely different, I'm sure, professional experience and set of kind of professional challenges. So how do you prepare for the cricket season in England?
Well, I really love the contrast. I mean, I love touring. I mean, I love touring slightly less than I used to. I've got 3 small girls now, and going away, especially over Christmas, is not as exciting as it used to be, partly for that reason. But I do like the contrast between being kind of your own boss in a country on the other side of the world, and giving, because of course the time difference is a nightmare for newspapers. If you write about the first day's play in an Ashes Test in Australia, it won't be read in England in a newspaper until after the second day's play has happened. Mm-hmm. So you get yourself into all sorts of problems if you start saying England battered themselves into a strong position and then they collapse on day 2, and your report's meaningless. So you're always thinking about pieces that can hold. It's kind of a web first tour. I enjoy that challenge. You come back to England, and then I do really like April and May in England now, because there's a bit less pressure professionally. The England team aren't playing. Equally, there's a chance to go out and do different things. You can chase stories that other people aren't doing. You're not on the, you don't have a daily press conference like you do in Australia, which is, I have very mixed feelings about these kind of daily press conferences, because on the one hand, you're staying close to the team and you're getting insights into what's going on. You can read a player's body language or mood, and you can have a quiet word in the corner afterwards. You can do your work in the hotel lobby, and a couple of players might walk past who might give you the time of day and tell you something. Those things are all fine.
Yeah.
Equally, you're all writing about the same thing that's happening in front of you, and there's a bit of spoon feeding going on. So I like the fact that you're let loose when you come back to England. I've done a piece recently about chips in cricket balls, for example, that I wouldn't have had time to do in Australia. I went to interview Alan Lamb in Northampton. He had some strong views about England. I did a piece on the non-host counties meeting in secret to discuss their future. All these stories that you get time to do are kind of what excite me as a journalist. So I do like that contrast.
Yeah. And then when you're coming up to this bit of the summer now, where I haven't quite got my dates straight, but that first test will be upon us, and that will then carry the narrative through the rest of the summer. I mean, it's slightly different this year, as we'll come to from some other years. But to what extent are you preparing? To what extent are you thinking, I need to be aware of particularly who the touring players are going to be, etc., and have conversations with colleagues overseas? And to what extent are you trying to be like, I can't preempt stuff. I can't go into this series thinking this is going to be the year of so-and-so, or, kind of prejudice the narrative too much in that way?
No, I mean, you have to be open-minded. I mean, in terms of the Daily Mail, I'll try to get a couple of interviews with New Zealand players in advance, so that we're not just too Anglo-centric. Try and introduce a couple of the bigger names to readers. I mean, newspaper journalism is in many ways a different beast to Wisden. Obviously, one of the things that people don't always remember is that it's not quite generalist writing, but you are part of a sports package, 10 pages of sport, where a lot of people might be rugby fans or football fans. So there's a cricket piece. You're almost explaining stuff that you take for granted, but you should never assume the readers are on top of these subjects. So it is a very different beast. No, you don't want to prejudice anything. I mean, to go back to Wisden briefly, one of the things I do think about when I go into a season is who hasn't been named a Wisden Cricketer of the Year yet, because you can only get that once in your career, obviously. So you start each year going, who are the England players who've not been named yet? Who are the big name overseas players who are coming, who, if they have a good summer, will they be in the mix? And then you're keeping an eye on county cricket. So of course there are, you go in with some ideas, but you have to be flexible and adapt.
Yeah. Just on that point, you mentioned there about, you're writing for the newspaper, you're writing for a generalist audience, even if increasingly, or in fact, probably always the case that it's a slightly self-selecting audience, because it will be cricket fans who read that piece primarily. But when the environment has become so specialized and there's so much room, you could be on podcasts, you could be appearing in TV segments or radio segments that are really kind of super serving that specialist audience. And obviously a lot of your colleagues now increasingly in the press boxes will be at places like Cricinfo, where they are also serving big specialist audiences and not thinking, then they'll have a different set of incentives, because it might not be as England focused, but it might also be much more cricket focused kind of thing. How do you, I don't want to say switch that on and off, but how do you kind of attune yourself to the needs of a particular piece, a particular audience? What kind of thought do you give that?
Well, there is a degree of following the news cycle. I mean, that's another thing that's quite hard to explain to if you're not involved in journalism. What is this mysterious beast? And I suppose instinct kicks in after a while. You know what the next story is. If another newspaper gets a story you don't have, it's how can you take that on? Or if there's a sort of an issue bubbling under, like, for example, what counties do with the 100 money, then it's up to you to try and think laterally and think, well, how could I make this story presentable journalistically with integrity, but also make it presentable and understandable to the reader? You're the kind of middle person between what's going on. You're trying to simplify. I mean, that is essentially both the strength and weakness of journalism. You need to make it presentable, but you don't want to simplify it too much. So that's your challenge. And yeah, I mean, sometimes, there's still a premium on good news stories. Exclusives are still what what make the business go round. I mean, at the Daily Mail now we have this thing, Mail Plus, which is our paywall, and we'll get people signing up to exclusives in a way we wouldn't for a story that 3 other newspapers have got. So you can't just turn up now to a press conference, regurgitate what they say, unless it's a massive set piece, England named Test squad or Ben Stokes quits or whatever, then clearly you have to reflect that. But otherwise, you have to think laterally and think differently. And that's a good thing, really, not just for journalists, which is a very small group, and that sounds a bit self-absorbed, but for the readers as well. They can get more for their buck now on the just around the traps looking online. There's more variety now than I think there used to be.
Yeah, sure. More variety as well in this summer. There's 4 tours happening of England this summer. I think New Zealand, Pakistan in Test, and Sri Lanka and India in 4 men's tours, I should say. Sri Lanka and India in white ball. And then you have, warm-up games going on right now for the Women's T20 World Cup, which we'll get to. Is there a difference in how you approach things when, obviously you have the Ashes, which completely defines the year that's played in. I think increasingly India series, if you think back a couple of years, are coming to perform the same role. A couple of years last year, coming to perform the same role, where you have these 5 test series that completely dominate that stretch of the summer. Is there a difference between that and when you have these 2 shorter series that maybe have more going on, but it's a shorter burst, or maybe they don't quite sink their teeth into people, or people don't sink their teeth into them quite so much, or what have you? What are your thoughts on that? Especially because, this week we're hearing that we're going to see more 5 test series and more kind of one-off games potentially in other places.
Yeah, it's a good question. Sometimes as cricket journalists, we get a bit jumpy when there's no Ashes or India. It's like, how much space are we going to get in the paper this summer? The Ashes and India speak for themselves in terms of the coverage. So I think what you have to do is, for this summer with New Zealand and Pakistan coming, you have to look at what is the broader narrative. Now, the narrative is quite clear at the moment. It's, can England recover from the Ashes, and how will they do things differently, given that they've stuck with McCullum, Rob Key to a degree? Stokes is always going to stay. What will the relationship be like between Stokes and McCullum? There were signs that they were diverging slightly in Australia. So you're looking at those broader pictures. And the cricket, once the cricket starts, people will be interested in the cricket, but perhaps the build-up to it is slightly trickier. So you're looking at ways journalistically of telling a more overarching story, if you like.
Yeah. That rain has now migrated south, so it's apologies to anyone listening. If you can still pick it up, kind of hopefully the production will weed some of that out. The Women's T20 World Cup we've mentioned a couple of times now. That will that be on your beat? Obviously you'll have specialist women's cricket writers who have been following that around, but how much is that just for you personally going to be something that you're across?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll be across it. We'll cover. I'd like to cover more women's cricket than we do. The men's coverage is sort of all encompassing, really. But we'll cover England properly. The crunch end of the tournament. It's an interesting time for women's cricket. I think in this country, newish coach and captain after the sort of their latest Ashes debacle. English women's cricket never really made the most of winning the World Cup at home in 2017. That should have been an absolute turning point for the game. In fact, what proved the turning point for women's cricket was the 100 and the accidental double headers, which happened because of COVID. Now that has proved huge because, for obvious reasons, people are coming in towards the end of a women's game, so they can watch a bit of that before the men's game, and actually discovering that it's a damn good product.
Yeah,
and professionalisation has changed things. Now, can England close the gap on Australia and to a degree India now is another big question. So they're fascinating in their own way, and probably deserve more coverage than they get.
Yeah, are you conscious of, in your seat, I think if you're a general sports fan, that is probably the cricket story of the summer. Because, it will be competing, of course, with a different World Cup for a part of it. But, there will be access to families to those games. The tickets are a bit cheaper and there will be a lot of kind of marketing around it, and I'm not sure what the free-to-air mix is, but I think there will be some free-to-air coverage as well. And particularly if England do well, then that becomes a big story. And I think, there is a lot of speaking to and hearing from people involved with that tournament. There's a lot of focus on let's keep pushing this. This is about momentum. I think it's the kind of the B2B line on it is like from moment to movement or something like that. But the idea being that this isn't just a set piece. We're now going to say, as you say, there is 100 cricket. There's, internationals happening later in the summer. There's all sorts of things that people want to build out from this tournament. Are you conscious that that could be where the focus ends up being and what the summer ends up being remembered for?
I think a lot of it depends on how well England do.
Yeah.
I think if they flop or don't get, they've got to reach the final at least, really, in a home summer. If they do that, and especially if they go on to win it, then that is potentially huge. We've seen with the Lionesses in football and the Roses in rugby, world champions, that suddenly the coverage of women's sport can go from down here to up there. Yeah. Now that is cricket's challenge. If they don't do well, then I do fear for what happens beyond the excellent work that's been done in the 100. And I've been to some 100 games, and I've been very impressed with the demographics there, if you like, to put it bluntly. More women and children, which is precisely what the ECB were hoping to attract. Now, at some point, they also need a really strong international side to cheer on. So it's going to be crucial. To what degree it will define the summer. It's hard to say at the moment, but we just want to avoid a situation where it falls by the wayside.
Yeah, for sure. Let's talk about the 100 for a bit. That will be one dimension in which is big, I think, if England do win that tournament, because you'll start seeing, in the same way as you've seen a little bit in the WSL, in football, England's own so-and-so in whatever team it happens to be, depending on who particularly performs over the course of the summer. And you'll also see a lot of, unlike the men's edition, you'll see a lot of the players representing other countries who, could also break through over the course of the next few weeks in that tournament too. But of course, the other side of it in the men's game is inevitably about politics and personalities and money and what that strange beast now becomes, because in the men's game it will take on an altered form, and it is clearly pursuing a slightly different path after the investment last year that is in this broader kind of franchise ecosystem in cricket. How do you think that story is going to unfold over the course of this year? What are you looking out for, I suppose, is the first question. Well,
I think what you've touched on there is right, which is that the 100 for men's cricket is, I think, a kind of a business story. It's not so much a sporting story. I mean, I personally don't care who wins the 100, and I don't have much interest in who's signed for who or the actual cricket. I mean, I'm sure there are some people who do, and that's absolutely fine. I'm not sort of mocking them. Just my own personal interest in the competition is what it means financially for English cricket. And so a reference story earlier that I'd done for the Mail about the non-host counties meeting behind the ECB's back in April at Northampton because they were concerned about the future of county cricket. Now, the headline from the ECB that they'd want you to absorb is that the 25 million that each non-host county will get will bankroll red ball cricket for a generation. And the message they're sending to the counties is, look, if you can't make this work, then I'm afraid you're on your own. We've bailed you out. This is something to keep you going. Make it work. The counties are sort of less sure about what this means. So you can only access that money. You have to present a strong business plan to the ECB. You can only access that money by convincing them that you're going to use it on infrastructure or to pay off sort of organised debt, not the bad debt that Sussex got into, for example. So it's not quite as bankrolly a situation as the ECB make out. And of course, then you've got the new TV deal coming in 2028, 29. And the worry then is that the host counties, 100 counties, driven by their new rich owners, will push for a separate 100 deal. It's like, well, we're the teams who are generating the money, why should we share that with the rest? Now, if that happens, that is potentially problematic for the non-host teams, because they won't know how much of their money they can spend now and on what, because it might fall off a cliff. The TV deal might fall off a cliff in a couple of years' time. So there's a lot of concern at the moment around the Shires about what the landscape looks like once the current TV deal ends. So that's what I'll be looking at. I'll be looking at sort of potential developments on where that goes, where that leaves the county game.
Yeah, because those are the two dimensions of it, right? Is what happens with the money, which is a lump sum. It's not coming back, and there need to be some very sensible decisions, as you say, and also what happens with the tournament, which was constructed and conceived for a very specific purpose, and now becomes, these investors are going to want it to be probably the secondary thing to the IPL in cricket, right? Lots of people have talked about, we're not buying the teams, apart from maybe in London Spirit's case, where they're saying, obviously Lords is an asset and all the rest of it. But we're buying August in the cricket calendar. That's what's appealing. And so who knows what their 5-10 year plan is for that tournament and how it connects to the rest of the sport.
Yeah, well, I think people have to understand that the very rich businessmen in India are not buying into this for the sake of it. They won't have any real loyalty, and nor should they really, to the 18-team first-class structure in England. That is not their concern. They have bought into this to make money. It's a business proposition. It's an investment. And they will, they're all involved. They have to be involved for 5 years. Those are the terms of the deal. If they decide that after, perhaps in year 3, 4, things aren't proving as profitable as they would like, they may walk away. And who knows where that will leave the game. So look, the ECB there's a lot of delight about the money that they've brought into the game, but there are lots of questions still to be answered. And those answers will only become apparent really in the next couple of years.
Yeah. All of this brings us back round to where we started a little bit, which is, the different communities there are, even within the cricket fan base in this country. There are people who are very committed to county cricket. There are people who barely have heard of any players until they pop up in the England conversation. And now there will be a generation of younger fans who have come into the game through the 100. How conscious are you of that when you're thinking about what stories you're going after, or what audiences you might be serving?
Well, for both my roles, in a way, you should never forget the core readership. The people who buy Wisden for the reasons they've always bought Wisden. You'd be foolish to turn your back on them. And similarly for the Daily Mail, people, if anyone buys the Daily Mail for its cricket coverage, and I hope there are a few, I don't think they're buying it because they want to read about the 100. So you have to bear that in mind. Equally, it's the old problem. You want to get new readers in. I mean, you want teenagers to be interested in buying Wisden. I mean, it's a bit of a challenge because it's a big,
unless
thick
they're
book,
in it.
Unless they're in it, unless they've been given it as a present. But you do hear stories. I think we underestimate the attention spans of youngsters these days. I think sort of patronising talk about how long they can sit still and watch something for, what they can read. So that we have to accept that it will always appeal to a smallish part of the market. That is what Wisden is. It's not a mainstream. It's not a mass publication in that sense. We can never match YouTube numbers for a Ravichandran Ashwin video. We're not trying to. We have to be honest about our position in the market and play to our strengths. And otherwise, we turn off most of the people who buy us.
Yeah. And what do you think is going to define the kind of future of cricket media as some of these things play out over the next few years?
I think you've got to retain credibility and trust. For all the kind of excitement about TikTok and Instagram and all these things, which are obviously a huge part of the landscape now, you'll only survive in the old media, which is trying to evolve, if you have a voice that has some authority, and if you break stories, and if you become someone that people will go to with stories. So you've got to trust in the fact that good stories will sell, whatever the evolution of the media. And that people are interested in those things. You've got to not underestimate or patronize the readership and think they just want stuff that is digestible in 10 seconds. One of the interesting developments for Wisden is that in the age of hot news, that it seems there's still a place for the voice that steps back a bit and takes a considered view. And I think people appreciate that, actually, as everything's becoming more ephemeral and fly by night. That this a voice that has integrity, authority, and independence, all the things we like to pride ourselves on at Wisden, has some clout. So don't lose the faith in that basic trust in our readers.
Okay, perfect. Right, 3 questions that I'm going to ask you before I let you go. The first is, do you have an origin story or something that sparked your interest in sport?
Well, I first collected football stickers when I was about 5, and I didn't finish the book because I didn't have enough pocket money. But I finished. I ended up with the most
money these days. From what I understand.
Well, it was. I think it was about 5p or 10p a packet then. Anyway, the most stickers I ended up with was Manchester City, and that season, 81, they reached the FA Cup final, famous replay which they lost to Spurs, and I cried when they lost, and I thought, well, clearly this is my team. And so I've supported City ever since the age of 5 or 6, and they were useless for 30 years, and then the story has obviously changed somewhat in the last 15 years. So totally random, really. I grew up in Oxford. I had nothing to do with Manchester, but I've always stuck with them.
Yeah, that's amazing. You talk about the 100 and stuff like that, all the ways that people could think of to engineer, and do think of now, to engineer those kind of happy accidents of discovery.
That's right.
What's your favourite piece of sports storytelling?
I probably 15, 20 years ago, I read a book by an American sports writer called John Feinstein. It was called A Good Walk Spoiled, and it was about life on the PGA Tour. And it was a brilliant book because he did, in a way, American sports writing was ahead of British sports writing for a long time, in as much as it would send these guys off, it's usually guys, to immerse themselves in a world that you wouldn't necessarily think of. And he covered the ups and downs of life on the golf circuit with these golfers who were trying to retain their card. It would mean financial disaster if they didn't get it. They missed that putt on the 18th. They're paying their way around in what was actually quite an unglamorous lifestyle, living in godforsaken motels in the middle of nowhere because they needed to make their card. And what he did was he brought to life the kind of the underbelly of sport. A lot of sports stories are about triumph and glory, and that's fine. That's as you'd expect. But a lot of the human interest stories, which are kind of what interests me as much as anything, can be found in failure and struggle. And I think that to read that book, to read 500 pages of brilliant reporting, kind of really got to me. I thought I'd love to do something like that one day myself.
Yeah, that's that kind of road tradition in the States, I guess, because even the beat reporters are traveling like hundreds of miles at a time. But there must be something now that you recognise from having done tours from the county cricket circuit, from that sort of thing. Now that when you reflect on that, I mean, a lot of hard yakka is the kind of the cricket equivalent to that, I suppose. Simon Hughes,
yes,
in the 90s.
Yes, I think you're right. Tour books aren't published now in the same way as they used to be, because publishers want to know the result before it happens, before they commission. So it's quite hard to do that now. I mean, I co-wrote a book with Nick Holt from the Telegraph called Bazball, which hasn't aged very well, as it turns out. But we were kind of writing it as we went along. We were writing it during the 23 Ashes, and when they went 2-0 down, we thought this is going to be a disaster, because who's going to buy this thing? Now, had it not rained in Manchester, we might have got one of the all-time great comebacks. As it was, 2-2 wasn't a bad story. But that was a rare example, actually, of publishers backing something in as it was live. You have to think a bit more laterally now with cricket books, beyond kind of ghosted autobiographies of star names. And there's a lot of, there are some publishers who, let's put it so, they don't pay you much. So there's a bit of vanity publishing going on. You can do that. You could probably get most things published now if you wanted to. But if you want to be properly backed and remunerated, you have to come up with a good idea.
Yeah. Speaking of which, what's a sports story you'd like to tell or see somebody else tell?
One of my favourite cricket books growing up was Anyone But England by Mike Marksey, who was an American Marxist who loved cricket. It's a slightly weird story, but he wrote this excellent kind of takedown of the cricketing establishment in England and explained why England is essentially no one's second favourite team. And I've always been conscious of that as an English cricket writer travelling around the world. It's actually a fascinating phenomenon to observe. I get that there are obviously historical and cultural reasons why that might be, but then you have to factor in the perceptions of arrogance and English exceptionalism, which still exists to a degree. And I always feel like that story is ripe for the retelling, especially since India have now overtaken them in the kind of power pecking order. That wasn't the case so much when Mike Moxey was writing, but I think given India's dominance now, that story is ready for to be retold 25 years on from when Mike Moxey wrote it.
Okay, we'll look out for that at some point when the moment's right.
Give me a few years.
Lawrence, it's been a lot of fun, and look forward to the summer.
Thanks, Owen. Thanks for having me. Really enjoyed it.